4-year-old beggar girl sees millionaire with son being mugged, but she saw everything and does something that shocked everyone. Comment what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10 and tell me what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and I want to get to know you better. So please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The March rain fell heavy on the streets of Redstone, Colorado, turning the red dust of the mining town into small, muddy streams that snaked between the uneven cobblestones. In the central market, amidst the noise of vendors hawking their wares and the intense smell of spices and ripe fruit, a small figure moved silently between the overflowing stalls. Isabella was only 4 years old, but her eyes carried a sadness that didn't match her age. Her brown hair, matted by the rain, stuck to her thin face as she held tightly to her only companion, a tattered rag doll with one arm nearly detached and its face faded by time and weather. The pink dress she wore, clearly too large for her frail body, was stained and torn in several places, a testament to the difficult days she lived on the city streets. The girl walked with cautious steps through the market aisles, her large, observant eyes watching every movement around her. She had learned from a very young age to become almost invisible, to hide behind crates of fruit and vegetable stands, to avoid disapproving glances or harsh words from merchants who saw her as a nuisance. Her stomach rumbled softly, reminding her that she hadn't eaten anything substantial since the previous morning when Mr. Ben, the owner of the small grocery stand at the back of the market, had shared with her the remnants of a cinnamon roll he couldn't sell. It was into this scene of silent need that Arthur Fleming entered the central market on that rainy afternoon. At 38, the mining executive cut an imposing figure even in his simplicity. He wore a light blue dress shirt, slightly wrinkled from the day's rush, and dark pants that showed signs of someone who had left the office in a hurry. In his arms, wrapped in a baby blue cotton blanket, was Thomas, his 3-month-old son, who had been crying incessantly for over 2 hours. Arthur's face revealed the exhaustion and worry of a first-time father who found himself alone, caring for a baby since his wife, Maria, had passed away from postpartum complications. His brown eyes, normally firm and decisive in business meetings, now showed a vulnerability he tried to hide from the curious gazes of passers-by. The dark circles under his eyes were evidence of sleepless nights, torn between the baby's inconsolable cries and an overwhelming longing for Maria. "Please, Thomas," he murmured softly, gently rocking his son as he headed to the back of the market where the pharmacy was located. "The doctor said this medicine will help you sleep better." The baby continued to cry, his tiny fists clenched as he squirmed in the blanket. Arthur felt the stares of curiosity and, at times, judgment from the people around him. Some whispered among themselves, questioning where the child's mother was, while others offered unsolicited advice on how to calm a baby. But he just wanted to get to the pharmacy, buy the medicine prescribed by the pediatrician, and go home, where he could try once more to establish some routine that would bring peace to them both. While waiting in line at the pharmacy, Arthur noticed the presence of little Isabella, who had positioned herself behind a shelf of hygiene products, watching him with curiosity. There was something in the girl's eyes that intrigued him, a mix of innocence and premature wisdom that seemed familiar, though he couldn't pinpoint why. She held her doll with such care that Arthur wondered when was the last time someone had hugged her with the same devotion. It was as the pharmacist was handing over the medicine for Thomas that the situation took an unexpected turn. A hooded man, his face partially covered by an old cap and a dark jacket, approached Arthur from behind. His hands trembled slightly, and there was a nervousness in his movements that immediately caught Isabella's attention from her hiding spot. "Hey, you!" the man said in a rough voice, pressing something against Arthur's back. "Hand over the wallet and the phone, and don't make a sound." Arthur froze, his heart racing. Thomas continued to cry in his arms, and he realized he was completely vulnerable. His hands trembled slightly as he considered his options, thinking of the son who depended on him and the fear that something might happen right there. It was in that moment that Isabella's high-pitched voice cut through the tense market air. "The police are coming. The police are on their way." The girl's shout echoed between the stalls, causing several merchants and customers to look in their direction. The hooded man, clearly startled by the possibility of being caught, glanced around quickly and decided to flee, running towards the market exit without taking anything. Arthur stood still for a few seconds, processing what had just happened, while Thomas finally stopped crying, as if he too had sensed the danger had passed. "Thank you," Arthur said, turning to find Isabella still hidden behind the shelf. "You saved me." The girl slowly emerged from her hiding place, clutching her doll tightly. Her large eyes stared at him with a mixture of shyness and curiosity, as if she wasn't used to receiving thanks or positive attention. "He was a bad man," she said in her childish voice, yet it was filled with a seriousness that impressed Arthur. "I saw you were scared." Arthur knelt to be at her eye level, still holding Thomas in his arms. "What's your name?" "Isabella," she replied, looking down. "And you?" "Arthur, and this is my son, Thomas." He paused, observing the state of the girl's clothes and her general appearance. "Do you live around here?" Isabella hesitated, as if unsure how to answer. "I live in a lot of places." The answer touched Arthur deeply, and he began to understand the girl's situation. He took his wallet from his pocket and held out a few bills to her. "I want to thank you for what you did. Take this, buy yourself something to eat." To his surprise, Isabella shook her head no. "I don't want money." "No? Then what do you want?" The girl looked at Thomas, who was now sleeping peacefully in his father's arms, then looked back at Arthur. "Can I have a hug?" The simplicity of the request struck a deep chord in Arthur's heart. He carefully adjusted Thomas in one arm and wrapped Isabella in a warm hug with the other. He felt the girl's small body relax against him, as if it were the first time in a long while she had received a genuine gesture of affection. When they separated, there were tears in both their eyes. "You're a very brave girl, Isabella," he said, standing up. "Thank you so much for everything." As he walked away with Thomas in his arms, Arthur couldn't stop thinking about those familiar eyes and the way the girl had risked herself to protect a stranger. There was something about her that sparked an inexplicable curiosity, a feeling that their meeting hadn't been just a coincidence. The days following the encounter at the market brought a restlessness that Arthur couldn't explain. While he tried to establish a routine with Thomas, who had finally started sleeping better with the new medicine, his mind constantly returned to Isabella's large, sad eyes. There was something in that gaze that deeply unsettled him, a familiarity he couldn't decipher but that insisted on occupying his thoughts. The following Wednesday, Arthur found himself driving back towards the central market, even though he had no real need to buy anything. Thomas slept peacefully in the car seat in the back, allowing his father to focus on a search he didn't fully understand himself. An inexplicable force was pulling him back to that place, as if an important part of his life was incomplete. The market was busier than on the previous rainy afternoon, with the strong March sun bringing more customers to the fruit and vegetable stands. Arthur walked slowly through the aisles, observing every corner, every shadow, searching for a small figure that could be hidden anywhere. His eyes scanned the shelves, the spaces between the stalls, the darker corners where a child might take refuge. It was near the grocer's stand at the back that he finally found her. Isabella was sitting on the ground, leaning against the establishment's outer wall, drawing with a piece of charcoal on a sheet of paper that had clearly been salvaged from the trash. Her rag doll was carefully positioned beside her, like an attentive companion watching the art being created. The girl was so focused on her drawing that she didn't notice Arthur's approach. "Hello, Isabella," he said softly, so as not to startle her. The girl looked up quickly, surprised, but her face lit up with a shy smile upon recognizing him. "Arthur, you came back." She quickly hid the drawing behind her back, as if it were too private to be shared. "I did. I wanted to thank you again for what you did." He knelt beside her, noticing that the clothes she wore were the same as the week before, only dirtier. "What were you drawing?" Isabella hesitated for a moment, then slowly brought the paper forward. The drawing showed two figures, a tall man holding a baby and a little girl beside them. Although made by a 4-year-old, there was a palpable emotion in the depiction of that moment at the market. "It's us," she said shyly. "You, Thomas, and me. It was the happiest day I've had in a long time." The girl's words touched Arthur deeply. He realized that their casual encounter had meant much more to her than he had initially imagined. "It's a very beautiful drawing, Isabella. You have a talent." "My mommy used to say I was good at drawing," she said, then immediately seemed to regret mentioning it, her eyes falling. "Your mommy? Where is she now?" Arthur asked gently. "I don't know. I can't really remember her. Sometimes I think I dream of a woman who sang to me, but I don't know if it's real." Isabella hugged her doll tighter. "Mr. Ben says I showed up here when I was very little, but he doesn't remember much." Arthur looked toward the grocer's stand, where an elderly man with grey hair was organizing crates of fruit. "Is Mr. Ben the one who takes care of you? He lets me sleep back here sometimes when it's not raining too much, and he gives me food when there are leftovers." Isabella paused as if weighing whether she should keep talking. "He's good to me, but he says he can't adopt me because he's too old and doesn't have the money." The girl's situation became clearer to Arthur with every word. He felt a mix of compassion and indignation, thinking about how such a small child had been left to fend for herself. "Isabella, are you hungry now?" She nodded shyly. Arthur stood up and extended his hand to her. "Let's go buy you something to eat." Together, they walked to a stall selling hot pretzels and corn dogs. Arthur ordered a warm cheese pretzel and an orange juice for Isabella, watching as she ate with a gratitude that broke his heart. It was evident she wasn't used to regular meals, and the careful way she savored each bite showed she knew how to value food. "Arthur," she said between bites, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you married? Where's Thomas's mom?" The question caught Arthur off guard. He swallowed hard, feeling the familiar ache in his chest that always arose when he thought of Maria. "Thomas's mom. She passed away when he was born. She got very sick and couldn't stay with us." Isabella stopped chewing and looked at him with those large, wise eyes. "Are you sad like I am when I think about my mommy?" "Yes, I am," he answered honestly. "Very sad sometimes." "Then we're alike," she said, returning to her food. "We both lost important people." The girl's simple yet profound observation made Arthur realize there was a connection between them that went beyond the chance encounter at the market. They both knew the pain of loss. Both were trying to navigate life carrying voids that seemed impossible to fill. When Isabella finished eating, Arthur felt reluctant to leave. "Isabella, would you like it if I came back to visit you sometimes?" The girl's face lit up. "You would do that, really?" "I would. And maybe I could bring Thomas for you to get to know better." "I'd love to meet your baby." She clapped her hands, showing a pure joy Arthur hadn't seen in a long time. "Can I draw something for him?" "I'm sure he'd be happy to have a drawing from you." It was then that Mr. Ben approached them, wiping his hands on a dirty cloth. He was a man of about 60, with wrinkles etched by the sun and hard work, but kind eyes that showed genuine concern for Isabella. "Good afternoon," he said, extending a hand to Arthur. "I'm Ben Carter. I saw you talking with the little one." "Arthur Fleming," he replied, shaking the man's hand. "Isabella helped me a few days ago, and I came to thank her. She's a good girl," Mr. Ben said, looking affectionately at Isabella. "Very smart and polite. It's a shame about her situation." "How long has she been with you?" Arthur asked. "About 3 years, more or less. A woman brought her here very sick, said she'd be back in a few days, but never showed up again." Mr. Ben lowered his voice. "The woman looked desperate, like she was running from something. She left the girl with me and disappeared that same night." "And you didn't try to contact the authorities?" "I did, but with no documents for the child. Not knowing who the parents were, there was nothing they could do. I ended up keeping her out of pity, but my situation isn't easy either." Mr. Ben sighed. "I do what I can, but she deserves better." Arthur absorbed this information, feeling that each detail about Isabella's past only deepened the mystery surrounding her. There was something about the story of the sick woman that intrigued him, a sense that this information would be important later. "Mr. Ben," he said carefully, "do you remember anything else about that woman? What did she look like?" The grocer stroked his graying beard, thoughtful. "She was a beautiful woman, but very thin, very pale. Brown hair, just like Isabella's. Spoke softly, as if she had trouble breathing." He paused. "And she had a little gold bracelet on her wrist with some letters engraved on it. I remember because it shone when she gestured." Arthur's heart unexpectedly quickened at this description. There was something familiar in those details, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. "Did you happen to see the letters on the bracelet?" "I couldn't see them clearly. It was dark and she was nervous, in a hurry." Mr. Ben looked at Isabella, who was playing with her doll a few feet away. "But the girl has a similar bracelet. She was wearing it when she arrived and has never taken it off." Arthur felt a chill run down his spine. "Can I see her bracelet?" Mr. Ben called Isabella, who approached curiously. "Can you show your bracelet to Mr. Arthur?" Isabella held out her small wrist, revealing a delicate gold bracelet with 2 engraved letters that made Arthur's world stop for an instant. MF, the same initials as the bracelet Maria always wore, the same one he had kept among his most precious belongings after she was gone. A bracelet identical to that one, on the wrist of an abandoned child whose eyes were hauntingly familiar. The discovery of the MF initials on Isabella's bracelet left Arthur in a state of shock for the rest of that afternoon. He drove home on autopilot, his mind working feverishly to process the impossible coincidence he had just witnessed. Thomas slept peacefully in the back seat, oblivious to the emotional storm ravaging his father. Maria Fleming. The initials engraved on the delicate gold bracelet were exactly the same as the one his late wife never took off her wrist, a bracelet he had given her on their first wedding anniversary, customized with her initials as a symbol of their eternal love, the same bracelet that was now stored in his dresser, along with Maria's other precious belongings. Arriving at his spacious home in an upscale neighborhood, Arthur put Thomas in his crib and went straight to the bedroom he had shared with Maria. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the drawer where he kept her mementos. Photos, perfume, a few pieces of jewelry, and at the bottom, wrapped in a silk scarf, the gold bracelet with the same MF initials. He held the bracelet up to the light, examining every detail. It was identical to the one he had seen on Isabella's wrist, even down to the style of the engraved letters, but that was impossible. Maria had commissioned that bracelet from an exclusive jeweler in Denver. There were only 2 identical pieces, one for her and one she intended to give to the daughter they dreamed of having, but who never came to be. Or at least, that's what Arthur had always believed. He sat heavily on the bed, the bracelet still in his hands, as memories of Maria's last months of life began to rearrange themselves in his mind. There had been strange behaviors he had attributed to her illness, the mysterious outings, the doctor's appointments she insisted on attending alone, the whispered phone calls that stopped when he entered the room. At the time, everything seemed explainable by the debilitating condition she faced. But now, these memories took on a new, disturbing meaning. Maria had become more reserved in her final months, claiming she needed time alone to process her medical situation. Arthur had respected that space, focusing on his work to afford the expensive, experimental treatments she was so eager to try. He vaguely remembered her mentioning that she would have some consultations in Redstone, where there was a specialized clinic. But he had never paid much attention to the details. The doorbell rang, pulling him from his turbulent thoughts. It was Mrs. Eleanor Vance, Maria's mother, a 65-year-old woman who had taken on the role of unsolicited advisor since her daughter's passing. Tall and imposing, with her grey hair always impeccably styled, she carried an authoritarian presence that often made Arthur uncomfortable. "Arthur, how are things?" she asked, entering the living room without waiting for an invitation. "Is Thomas eating well?" "He's better, yes. The medicine the pediatrician prescribed has been helping with the reflux." Arthur quickly put the bracelet in his pocket, not wanting to explain his agitation to his mother-in-law. "That's good. Maria would be happy to know you're managing to take care of him properly." Mrs. Vance sat on the sofa, her words laden with a subtle criticism Arthur had learned to ignore. "By the way, I heard you've been frequenting the Central Market with some regularity." The statement caught Arthur off guard. "How did you know that?" "Redstone isn't such a large city, Arthur. People talk." She adjusted the pearl necklace around her neck, a gesture she made when she was about to deliver a scolding. "Especially when they see a respected businessman conversing with street children. It was just a casual situation," Arthur lied, not wanting to go into detail. "I certainly hope so. The Fleming family has a reputation to uphold, and inappropriate associations can harm not only your image, but also Thomas's future." Mrs. Vance leaned forward, her blue eyes fixed on him. "Maria was always very careful with appearances. She knew our social standing comes with responsibilities." Arthur felt a growing irritation with his mother-in-law's attitude, but maintained his composure. "Mrs. Vance, I'm not doing anything inappropriate. I just thanked a child who helped me. Street children are experts at manipulating kind-hearted adults, Arthur. They know exactly how to evoke compassion to get what they want." Her voice grew colder. "Don't let your loneliness after losing Maria make you vulnerable to that kind of exploitation." His mother-in-law's words struck a raw nerve. Arthur knew she disapproved of many of his decisions since he'd become a widower, but the suggestion that his compassion for Isabella was a result of vulnerability bothered him deeply. "Mrs. Vance, with all due respect, my decisions on how to handle charitable situations are my own. Charity has its place, but there are appropriate ways to practice it. Recognized institutions, serious organizations." She stood up, smoothing her skirt, "not personal relationships with people of dubious origin." After his mother-in-law left, Arthur felt even more agitated. Her words echoed in his mind, mixing with the questions Isabella's bracelet had stirred. He needed answers, but he didn't know where to begin looking. The next morning, he decided to return to the Central Market with a specific purpose. He wanted to talk in more detail with Mr. Ben about the woman who had left Isabella, especially about the bracelet and any other details he might have forgotten to mention. He found the grocer organizing crates of bananas at the front of his stand. Isabella was nearby, helping to separate the riper fruits from the green ones. her doll carefully positioned in a corner where it could watch the work. "Good morning, Mr. Ben," Arthur said. "May I speak with you privately for a few minutes?" The grocer nodded and asked Isabella to continue her work while they talked at the back of the stand. There, surrounded by empty boxes and sacks of potatoes, Arthur felt more comfortable asking the questions that tormented him. "Mr. Ben, about that woman who brought Isabella. You said she seemed to be running from something. Can you tell me more about that impression?" Ben stroked his beard, thoughtful. She was very nervous, constantly looking over her shoulder, as if someone might be following her, and she spoke with an urgency, as if she didn't have much time. "Do you remember anything specific?" she said. "I remember she asked me to take good care of the girl, said she was very special, and she cried a lot when she left, as if it was breaking her heart to leave the child." Ben paused, watching Isabella through the window. "Oh, and she mentioned something about the girl's father. Said he didn't know she existed." Arthur's heart raced. She said that? That the father didn't know? She did. Said she had tried to protect everyone by keeping it a secret, but that she couldn't anymore. Ben lowered his voice. "And she asked me to never tell anyone about the bracelet. Said if anyone asked about her, I should say I didn't know anything." "Why would she say that?" "I don't know, but it seemed very important to her. She made me swear to keep it a secret." Ben looked directly into Arthur's eyes. "I'm telling you this, sir, because I see how you look at the girl, and because I think she deserves to have someone who truly cares about her." Arthur felt he was on the verge of a discovery that could completely change his understanding of the last few years of his life. "Mr. Ben, did the woman have any physical resemblance to Isabella?" "She did. The same big eyes, the same small mouth. You could tell they were family." Ben hesitated. "Mr. Arthur, may I ask you a question? Why are you so interested in learning about Isabella's mother?" Arthur took a deep breath, deciding to share some of his suspicions. "Because I think I may have known this woman, and if it's who I think it is, that would change everything." At that moment, Isabella appeared at the back door, holding her doll and smiling innocently. "Arthur, you came to visit me again." Looking at those familiar eyes, at the delicate shape of her face, at the gestures that strangely reminded him of Maria, Arthur felt a certainty growing in his chest, a terrifying yet hopeful certainty that he still didn't dare to name completely. "I did, Isabella, and I brought something for you." He pulled a small notepad and colored pencils from his pocket, which he had bought on the way. "For you to make more beautiful drawings." The girl's face lit up in a way that made Arthur's heart ache. There was a familiarity in that smile that went far beyond mere coincidence, and he began to suspect that Maria had kept a secret far greater than he had ever imagined possible. The following days were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions for Arthur. He found himself torn between the growing suspicion that Isabella might have some connection to Maria and the need to keep his daily life running normally. Thomas required constant care, and the commitments of the mining company could not be neglected, but his mind constantly returned to those familiar eyes and the bracelet with the MF initials. During a particularly tense meeting about new mining contracts, Arthur found himself zoning out, his attention focused on the physical similarities between Isabella and Maria. The large, expressive eyes, the delicate line of her chin, even the way the girl tilted her head slightly when she was thoughtful, all of it awakened painful memories of his late wife. It was upon arriving home that Thursday that Arthur made a decision that would change the course of everything. He went to the office he kept on the upper floor of the house and began to meticulously search through Maria's papers. There were medical documents, prescriptions, notes in her delicate handwriting, all carefully organized in folders he had never had the courage to examine in detail after her passing. It was in the middle of a folder of medical consultations that he found something that made his blood run cold. A small, blue-covered planner with sparse notes from the last months of Maria's life. Most of the entries were cryptic, just times and places, but one immediately caught his attention. Redstone, Dr. Mason, 2 p.m., repeated several times in the last 3 months before her death. Redstone. Maria had been going regularly to Redstone to see a doctor Arthur had never met or even heard of. Why would she keep that a secret, and why specifically in that city, where he had now found Isabella? Arthur searched online for a Dr. Mason in Redstone and found information about an obstetrician specializing in high-risk pregnancies. The discovery left him stunned. Maria had been seeing an obstetrician in secret during the last months of her life, exactly when she was supposedly just fighting a degenerative disease. His mind began to form a terrible and yet hopeful theory. What if Maria hadn't just hidden medical appointments, but an entire pregnancy? What if the illness that took her had been complications from a secret birth? And what if Isabella? Thomas's cries interrupted him, pulling him back to reality. As he prepared a bottle, Arthur tried to organize his thoughts. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit, but there were still huge gaps that needed to be filled. He needed more information, and he knew exactly where to start looking. The next morning, Arthur called his secretary and cancelled all his appointments for the day. He placed Thomas in his car seat and drove to Dr. Mason's office in Redstone. His strategy was simple. Introduce himself as Maria Fleming's widower and try to find out what his wife had hidden from him in her final months. The office was in a central part of the city, in a modest but well-kept medical building. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with gold-rimmed glasses, greeted him with professional cordiality. "Good morning, do you need to make an appointment?" she asked. "Actually, I'd like to speak with Dr. Mason about my late wife, Maria Fleming. She was a patient of his a few years ago." The receptionist's expression immediately changed, becoming more cautious. "I'm sorry, sir, but patient information is confidential, even in cases of death. I understand, but I'm her widower and there are some matters I need to clarify." Arthur showed his ID and Maria's death certificate, which he always carried with him. The receptionist examined the documents carefully, then asked him to wait while she consulted the doctor. After a few minutes, she returned, accompanied by a man of about 50, with graying hair and a serious expression. "Mr. Fleming, I'm Dr. Mason. Vera explained your situation to me." The doctor observed him intently. "May I ask what specifically brings you here after all this time?" Arthur took a deep breath, deciding to be direct. "Doctor, I recently discovered that my wife was seeing you regularly in her last months, but she never told me about it. I need to know what she was hiding from me." Dr. Mason became visibly uncomfortable. "Mr. Fleming, I understand your curiosity, but I have ethical obligations that prevent me from—" "Doctor, if Maria was pregnant and I didn't know, that changes everything. There could be a child out there who is my daughter." The words came out of Arthur with desperate urgency. The doctor's reaction was immediate and telling. His eyes widened slightly, and he glanced nervously at the receptionist before turning his attention back to Arthur. How did you come to that conclusion? Does that mean I'm right? Was Maria pregnant?" Dr. Mason was silent for a long moment, clearly struggling with ethical and professional issues. Finally, he gestured for Arthur to follow him to his private office. "Mr. Fleming," he said after they sat down, "your wife made me swear I would never tell anyone about her pregnancy. She was convinced it was for the best. But why? Why would she hide it from me?" "Because the pregnancy was extremely dangerous. Maria was already sick when she became pregnant, and the gestation only worsened her health. She knew that if she told you, you would try to make her terminate the pregnancy to save her life." Arthur felt as if the world was collapsing and rebuilding itself at the same time, and she chose to continue, even knowing the risks. She did. She said she wanted to leave something of the two of you in the world before she passed. Dr. Mason paused, choosing his words carefully. The child was born prematurely but healthy. A girl. A girl, Arthur repeated, his voice barely a whisper. What happened to her? Maria had made arrangements for adoption. She said she had found a good family who would take care of the baby. The doctor hesitated. But there were complications after the birth. Maria died 2 weeks later, and when I tried to contact the adoptive family, I found out the documents were fake. The intermediary had disappeared with the money. My God, Arthur murmured, covering his face with his hands. My daughter was sold. Not sold, Mr. Fleming. Abandoned. The woman who was supposed to deliver the baby to the adoptive family simply vanished. I tried to look for her, but without proper legal resources. The child just disappeared into the system. Arthur lifted his head, a determination growing in his eyes. Doctor, that baby. When was she born? What were her features? She was born in March of 2020, brown hair, large dark eyes, and... The doctor hesitated. Maria insisted she wear a specific bracelet with the initials MF. She said it was so her daughter would always carry something that connected her to her real mother. Arthur's heart was beating so hard, he was sure the doctor could hear it. All the pieces finally fit. Isabella wasn't just a street child he had helped by chance. She was his daughter, the daughter Maria had sacrificed her life to bring into the world, the daughter who had grown up alone and abandoned while he suffered in ignorance just a few miles away. "Doctor," he said, his voice trembling, "I think I've found my daughter." When he left the office, Arthur was in a state of emotional shock. The revelation that Isabella was his biological daughter changed absolutely everything. The inexplicable connection he felt with her, the familiarity of her features, the bracelet with the initials MF. It all finally made sense. But now he faced a complex dilemma: how to approach Isabella with this information. How to explain to a 4-year-old child that the man she had known for a few weeks was, in fact, her father. And most importantly, how to deal with the devastating guilt of knowing his daughter had spent the first years of her life abandoned and suffering, while he was just miles away, completely oblivious to her existence. Driving back to the Central Market with Thomas sleeping in the back seat, Arthur knew his life had just changed forever. He had a daughter who needed him desperately, and he would do anything to make up for the lost years and give her the love and security she deserved. Arthur's return to the Central Market that afternoon was different from all the other times. Every step toward Mr. Ben's stand carried the weight of a revelation that had completely transformed his understanding of reality. He was no longer just a kind man helping a child in need. He was a father who had finally found the daughter he never knew existed. Thomas slept peacefully in his arms as he approached the spot where Isabella usually spent her afternoons. The girl was sitting in her usual place, near the back wall of the stand, but this time she wasn't drawing. She held her ragdoll against her chest and watched the markets hustle and bustle with those large eyes that Arthur now knew were identical to Maria's. "Isabella," he called softly, and the girl's face lit up with a smile that both broke and healed his heart. "Arthur, you brought Thomas." She stood up quickly, adjusting her worn-out dress. "Can I see him up close?" "Of course you can." Arthur knelt, positioning the baby so Isabella could get a better look. "He's sleeping, but you can touch his little hand." With a delicacy that was impressive for a 4-year-old, Isabella extended her index finger and gently touched Thomas's tiny palm. The baby, even in his sleep, automatically closed his hand around her finger, and the smile that bloomed on Isabella's face was one of pure joy. "He likes me," she whispered, moved. He held my finger. Watching that interaction between his two children, because he now knew they were siblings, Arthur felt an overwhelming emotion. There they were, the two children Maria had left in the world, finally together, unaware of the deep connection they shared. "Isabella," he said carefully, "can I tell you something important?" The girl looked up, still gently holding Thomas's finger. "You can." Arthur took a deep breath, trying to find the right words for a conversation that would change both their lives. "Do you remember saying you don't know your daddy?" "I remember. Mr. Ben says my mommy never talked about him." Isabella tilted her head, curious. "Why are you asking?" Because I think I found out who your daddy is." Isabella's eyes widened. "You found out? Who is he? Where is he?" The innocence of the question made Arthur's heart race. How could he explain to a 4-year-old that he was the father she had never known? How could he reveal that they had been so close all these years without knowing the connection that bound them? "Isabella, remember when you told me about your mom, that you sometimes dream of a woman who sang to you?" "I remember. I also lost someone who used to sing. Thomas's mum was named Maria, and she sang the same songs you remember." Arthur paused, watching the girl's reaction. "She was a very beautiful woman, with brown hair like yours and big eyes like yours." Isabella was quiet for a moment, processing the information. "You think your wife was my mommy?" "More than that, Isabella. I'm sure Maria was your mother." Arthur reached out, gently touching the girl's face. "And if Maria was your mother, and she was married to me, then you're my daddy." The question came out as a whisper full of hope and disbelief. "I am, my daughter. I'm your daddy." The silence that followed was charged with intense emotions. Isabella looked at Arthur, then at Thomas, then back at him, as if she were trying to rearrange her entire mental world to include this new reality. "Why didn't you look for me before?" she asked, her small voice carrying a pain that devastated Arthur. "Because I didn't know you existed, my dear. Your mother. Our mother. She kept you a secret to protect me." Arthur felt tears burning in his eyes. "She knew you would make me too happy, but also that I would be too worried. So she decided to take care of you on her own. And now that you know I exist, now I want to take care of you forever. I want you to come live with me and Thomas. I want you to be my daughter, officially." Tears began to stream down Isabella's face, but they were tears of joy mixed with years of suppressed longing. "Can I really come live with you? And I'll never be alone again." "Never again, my princess. Never again." Isabella gently let go of Thomas's hand and threw herself into Arthur's arms, hugging him with all the strength her small arms could muster. "I always dreamed my daddy would come find me one day. And I did, my daughter. I took a while, but I came." Mr. Ben, who had witnessed part of the conversation from a distance, approached with tears in his eyes. "So that was it. That's why you were so interested in the girl. She's really your daughter." "She is, Mr. Ben, and I'm eternally grateful to you for taking care of her when I couldn't." Arthur stood up, still holding Isabella. "I want to compensate you financially for everything you've done for her." "I don't want money," the grocer said, shaking his head. "I just want her to be happy. This girl deserves all the love in the world." At that moment, Arthur realized he needed to think about the practical aspects of the situation. Taking Isabella home would be wonderful, but he needed to consider legal, medical, and family issues that could complicate everything. "Isabella," he said, kneeling again, "before you come home with me, I need to take care of some important grown-up things. It might take a few days." The girl's face clouded with fear. "Are you going to leave and never come back?" "Never. I promise I'll come back every day until I can take you home." Arthur held her little hands. "And in the meantime, I'll bring you new clothes, toys, everything you need." "And will Thomas come too?" "He will. Your brother and sister now." Isabella's joy was so pure and intense that it was contagious, even to other nearby merchants who had noticed that something special was happening. Some people approached, curious about the emotional scene of a family reunion, but not everything would be easy. Arthur knew that Mrs. Vance would not react well to the news that he had discovered a daughter Maria had kept secret. Furthermore, there would be complex bureaucratic hurdles to formalize custody of Isabella, especially since she lacked proper documents. "Mr. Ben," Arthur said, "I need your help with something. Can you look after Isabella for a few more days while I organize the necessary paperwork?" "Of course, I can. But may I suggest something?" The grocer hesitated. "It might be better not to spread the news too much until everything is settled. Sometimes the authorities complicate situations that should be simple." Arthur agreed. There was a lot that could go wrong if the story got out before he had all the legal documents in order, especially considering Mrs. Vance had influence in the city and might try to interfere if she thought the situation would harm the family's reputation. When he finally said goodbye to Isabella that afternoon, promising to return the next day with new clothes and more toys, Arthur felt torn between immense happiness and a growing concern. He had found his daughter, but now he had to fight to keep her. The conversation with Mrs. Vance would be unavoidable, and he knew it wouldn't be easy. His mother-in-law had always been skeptical of anything that might complicate the orderly life she deemed appropriate for the Fleming family. Discovering that Maria had hidden a pregnancy and that there was an illegitimate granddaughter living on the streets would be a shock that could result in unpredictable consequences. Driving home with Thomas, Arthur began to carefully plan his next steps. First, he needed to consult a lawyer about the legal procedures to obtain custody of Isabella. Then, he would need to arrange for proper documentation for her. And finally, he would have to face his family and explain a situation no one expected. But regardless of the obstacles that arose, one thing was certain. He would never leave Isabella alone again. She was his daughter, the final gift Maria had left for him, and he would do anything to protect her and give her the life she deserved. The night following the revelation was one of the longest of Arthur's life. After putting Thomas to bed, he locked himself in his office and spent hours on the phone with Richard Cole, his personal attorney, trying to understand the legal procedures needed to formalize custody of Isabella. "The situation is complex, Arthur," Richard explained, his voice sounding tired even over the phone. "A child without proper documents, no official birth record, raised by a third party without legal authority. This could take months to resolve." "But she's my biological daughter, Richard. I have the testimony of the doctor who delivered her. I can do a DNA test." "I understand, but the legal system doesn't work as quickly as we'd like, especially when there are issues of abandonment involved." Richard paused. "There's another problem we need to consider. Someone might question why you took so long to look for the child." "Because I didn't know she existed." "I know that, and you know that. But a skeptical prosecutor might argue paternal neglect, especially if someone in your family opposes the custody." The mention of his family made Arthur's stomach churn. Mrs. Vance would certainly object, and he knew she had enough connections in the city to significantly complicate the legal process. "Richard, how long do you think it might take for me to get official custody? With luck, 3 to 6 months. Without luck, it could take over a year." "A year?" Arthur felt despair rising in his chest. "She can't spend another year living on the street." "Calm down, Arthur. There's the possibility of emergency temporary custody, but we would need a solid justification of imminent risk to the child." The next morning, Arthur woke up with an iron resolve. Regardless of the bureaucratic hurdles, he would immediately start caring for Isabella as if he already had official custody. He bought clothes suitable for a 4-year-old, educational toys, hygiene products, and even a small bed that could be temporarily set up in the guest room. When he arrived at the central market with his car loaded with gifts, he found Isabella playing with her doll, but he noticed she seemed quieter than usual. Mr. Ben approached him with a worried expression. "Mr. Fleming, I need to tell you something. Last night, after you left, a woman showed up here asking questions about Isabella." Arthur's blood ran cold. What kind of questions? She wanted to know who had been visiting the girl, if anyone had shown interest in adopting her, things like that. She was a well-dressed older woman, spoke like she was educated. The description perfectly matched Mrs. Vance. Arthur sighed deeply, realizing his mother-in-law had found out about his meetings with Isabella and was investigating the situation on her own. "What did you say to her?" "I said I didn't know anything, that the girl had been living here for years and no one had ever been interested in her before." Mr. Ben lowered his voice, "But she was very insistent and even offered money for information." "She offered money?" "She did. Said she was concerned for the child's well-being and had the resources to ensure she was placed in a proper institution." Arthur felt a rising fury. Mrs. Vance wasn't interested in Isabella's well-being. She was trying to remove the girl from his life before he could formalize custody. She probably saw her granddaughter as an obstacle to the perfect image she maintained of the Fleming family. "Isabella," he called, approaching the girl who was watching their conversation with curiosity. "How did you sleep?" "Fine," she replied, but there was a hesitation in her voice. "Arthur, that lady who came yesterday said you might take me far away from here. Is that true?" "That's not true, my dear. No one is going to take you away from me." He knelt beside her. "Remember I promised you would come live with me?" "I remember." "Then that's what's going to happen. But some people haven't understood yet that you're my daughter, so they might try to get in the way of our plans." Isabella nodded with a seriousness beyond her years. "The lady seemed angry when I said I liked you." "She was angry. She was. She said children like me only bring trouble to good families." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Do I bring you trouble, Daddy?" The word Daddy, coming from Isabella's lips, touched Arthur deeply, but it also intensified his determination to protect her from anyone who tried to hurt her emotionally. "You don't bring any trouble at all, my princess. You only bring me joy." He hugged her tightly. "And anyone who says otherwise doesn't understand what real love is." At that moment, Arthur made an impulsive decision that would change everything. "Isabella, how about you come spend a few hours at my house today? You can see your room and play with Thomas." "Can I really?" The girl's eyes lit up. "You can." "Mr. Ben, can I take her for a few hours?" "Of course you can, Mr. Fleming. She's your daughter." The drive to Arthur's house was magical for Isabella. Sitting in the back seat next to Thomas's car seat, she observed everything with fascination. The bigger houses, the manicured lawns, the clean streets of the upscale neighborhood where her father lived. "Our house is so big," she said when they arrived. "Our house," Arthur repeated, liking the sound of the words. "Yes, it is. And it has a backyard where you can play whenever you want." Inside the house, Isabella was amazed by everything. The beautiful furniture, the photos on the walls, the books on the shelves. It was a world completely different from anything she had ever known. Arthur took her to the room that would be hers, where he had assembled the new bed and spread out the toys he had bought. "Is this room all mine?" she asked, gently touching the new mattress. "All yours. And when you come to live here officially, we'll decorate it just the way you want." Isabella ran around the room, hugged the new stuffed animals, and examined the storybooks. Her joy was so pure that Arthur felt his heart overflow with happiness. This was how a child should live, with security, comfort, and love. It was while they were having lunch in the kitchen that the situation took an unexpected turn. The doorbell rang insistently, and when Arthur opened the door, he found Mrs. Vance accompanied by an unknown man in a dark suit. "Arthur, we need to talk immediately," she said, pushing the door open and entering the house uninvited. "Mrs. Vance, it's not a good time. It's the best possible time." She looked around the room until she spotted Isabella, who had come out of the kitchen, curious about the noise. "Especially considering you've brought this child into my daughter's home," the man in the suit introduced himself. "I'm Mr. Evans from Child Protective Services. We received a report that a vulnerable child was being kept improperly at this residence." Arthur felt his world crumble. Mrs. Vance had called CPS to remove Isabella from his house. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding. This child is my daughter. According to the information we received, you do not have legal custody of the child, who was living in a state of abandonment at the Central Market. She is my biological daughter. I can prove it." "Even if that's the case, Mr. Fleming, without proper documentation and a legal custody process, you cannot keep the child here." Mr. Evans looked at Isabella with professional sympathy. "The girl needs to be taken to an appropriate facility until the situation is clarified." "No!" screamed Isabella, running to cling to Arthur's leg. "I don't want to go! I want to stay with my daddy!" "Daddy?" Mr. Evans raised an eyebrow, looking from Arthur to Mrs. Vance. "He has filled the child's head with fantasies." "Mrs. Vance said coldly, "This child needs professional care, not a lonely man who is clearly confusing charity with fatherhood." "Mrs. Vance, you have no right. I have every right to protect my family's reputation and ensure the children involved are treated appropriately." Mr. Evans knelt to Isabella's level. "Honey, I'm going to need you to come with me for a few days, until we get everything sorted out." "I don't want to go." Isabella clung even tighter to Arthur, her tears soaking his pants. "Please, Daddy, don't let them take me." Arthur's heart shattered as he saw the terror in his daughter's eyes. This was exactly what he had promised would never happen. She was being separated from him again. The scene that followed was one of the most painful Arthur had ever witnessed. Isabella clung to him with desperate strength, her sobs echoing through the room as Mr. Evans tried to gently persuade her to come with him. Mrs. Vance watched it all with a cold expression, clearly pleased with how things were turning out. "Please," Arthur pleaded, still holding Isabella close, "let me at least contact my lawyer. This child has spent years abandoned. She can't be separated from me again." "Mr. Fleming, I understand your distress, but the law is clear," Mr. Evans replied, though his tone showed genuine discomfort with the situation. "Without proper legal documentation, I cannot let the child remain here." "Daddy, don't let them take me," Isabella cried, her small hands clutching Arthur's shirt. "I promise I'll be a good girl. I promise I won't be any trouble." The girl's words broke the hearts of everyone present, except for Mrs. Vance, who maintained her unyielding posture. "Sir, the longer we delay, the more traumatic this becomes for the child. It's best to resolve this quickly." It was at that moment that a familiar voice came from the door. "What's going on here?" It was Mr. Ben, who had arrived breathless, clearly having run all the way there. "Mr. Ben, how did you get here?" Arthur asked. "Some of the market vendors told me they saw the lady," he pointed to Mrs. Vance, "asking for your address and talking about calling the authorities. I came running to warn you." Mr. Ben looked at Mr. Evans. "Sir, I've been taking care of this child for years. If anyone has the right to speak for her, it's me." Mr. Evans was interested in this new information. "Are you the child's legal guardian?" "Not officially, but in practice, yes. And I can assure you that this man he pointed to Arthur, has treated this girl better than anyone in her entire life. Oh, that's irrelevant, Mrs. Vance interrupted. What matters is that there is a legal procedure to be followed. And there's also the child's well-being to consider, Mr. Ben retorted. This girl has finally found someone who truly loves her, and you want to separate them over some paperwork. Isabella, who had stopped crying to listen to the argument, looked at Mr. Ben with gratitude. Grandpa Ben, can you tell them I want to stay with my daddy? I can, my little one. Mr. Ben turned back to Mr. Evans. Sir, may I suggest an alternative? What if the girl stays with me temporarily, but Mr. Fleming can visit her daily while he sorts out the documentation? Mr. Evans considered the proposal. Would you be able to adequately care for the child? I've been caring for her for 3 years. It's not the best conditions, but it's an environment where she feels safe. Mrs. Vance immediately objected. This is ridiculous. A child can't be raised in the back of a market. With all due respect, ma'am, Mr. Ben said, his patience clearly wearing thin. The child was being raised in the back of the market just fine until you showed up wanting to complicate her life. The argument was escalating when Thomas, who had been quiet in his car seat, began to cry. Isabella immediately let go of Arthur and ran to the baby, carefully picking him up and starting to rock him gently. Shh, Thomas, don't cry, she murmured, her voice still trembling from tears. Auntie's here. The baby calmed down almost instantly in Isabella's arms, and the scene deeply moved Mr. Evans. She takes care of the baby. She's his sister, Arthur said, seizing the opportunity. Children of the same mother. Separating these children would be cruel to both of them. Sister? Mr. Evans looked confused. But the baby clearly lives here with you. Because I didn't know Isabella existed. My wife hid her pregnancy due to complex medical issues. I only recently discovered the truth. Mrs. Vance intervened again. Sir, don't believe these fantasies. My daughter would never have hidden a pregnancy from me. Yes, she did, a new voice said from the door. It was Dr. Mason, the obstetrician from Redstone, who had arrived unexpectedly. Ma'am, I presume you are Maria Fleming's mother. Mrs. Vance turned pale. How? Who are you? Dr. Mason. I was your daughter's doctor during her pregnancy with Isabella. He addressed Mr. Evans. I came as soon as I heard there were legal issues involving this child's paternity. I can confirm that Mr. Arthur Fleming is the girl's biological father. The ensuing silence was tense. Mrs. Vance looked as if she had been struck, while Mr. Evans processed the new information. Dr. Mason, did you know about this pregnancy? Mr. Evans asked Mrs. Vance. I didn't know anything, she murmured, clearly shaken. Maria never told me. Maria requested absolute confidentiality. Dr. Mason explained the pregnancy was high risk due to her health condition. She feared her family would try to make her terminate it. Isabella, still holding Thomas, watched everything with her large, wise eyes. Grandma Eleanor, she said softly, don't you like me? The direct and innocent question hit Mrs. Vance hard. She looked at this small child who clearly had Maria's features, and for the first time her mask of coldness cracked. I didn't know you were. She paused, struggling with the words. If you are Maria's daughter, she is your granddaughter, Arthur said gently. Your granddaughter who spent years abandoned while you didn't know she existed. Mr. Evans, who had watched the entire situation unfold, finally made a decision. Mr. Fleming, considering the new information and the medical confirmation of paternity, I will allow the child to remain temporarily under your care. But there are conditions. What conditions? First, you must immediately begin the legal process for custody. Second, there will be regular social worker visits to assess the care conditions. And third, Any change in the situation must be reported to Child Protective Services immediately. I accept all conditions, Arthur said quickly, and I'll help with whatever is needed, added Mr. Ben. This family needs to stay together. Mrs. Vance remained silent for a long moment, watching Isabella care for Thomas with such naturalness and affection. Finally, she approached the girl. Isabella, now she said, her voice softer than before, may I see your bracelet? Isabella held out her wrist, showing the bracelet with the MF initials. Mrs. Vance gently touched the gold, immediately recognizing the piece she herself had helped Maria pick out years before. Maria bought one just like this for the daughter she dreamed of having, Mrs. Vance murmured, tears beginning to form in her eyes. She always said she would give this bracelet to her first daughter. Mommy gave it to me before she left, Isabella said. Mr. Ben told me. Mrs. Vance knelt to the girl's level, truly looking at her face for the first time. You have Maria's eyes, she whispered, and her smile when she was little. Are you my grandma? I am, my dear. Your grandma who made a very big mistake today. Mrs. Vance looked at Arthur with genuine remorse. Arthur, forgive me, I didn't know. If I had known she was Maria's granddaughter. The important thing is that now we all know the truth, Arthur said, feeling immense relief. Mr. Evans finished the necessary paperwork and prepared to leave. Mr. Fleming, I hope you understand that I was acting according to protocol. The child's well-being will always be our priority. I understand perfectly, sir. Thank you for being fair in this situation. After Mr. Evans and Dr. Mason left, the house grew strangely quiet. Isabella still held Thomas, who had fallen asleep in her arms, while the adults processed everything that had happened. Isabella, Mrs. Vance said, would you like to come visit me sometimes? I have many pictures of your mother when she was a little girl like you. Can I see the pictures of Mommy? You can, and I can tell you stories about her. Mr. Ben was getting ready to leave when Arthur held him by the arm. Mr. Ben, how can I ever thank you for what you've done for Isabella? Just take good care of her, Mr. Fleming. That girl deserves all the happiness in the world. That night, when Isabella finally slept in her own bed, in her own house, next to the room where her brother also slept peacefully, Arthur felt that his life had finally found its complete purpose. But he knew there were still challenges ahead, legal issues to resolve, family relationships to rebuild, and most importantly, years of abandonment and trauma that Isabella would need to overcome to become truly happy and secure. The first few days of Isabella's life in Arthur's house were a delicate and moving period of adjustment. The girl, who had spent years living in constant insecurity, now found herself in an environment where she had her own room, regular meals, and most importantly, the loving attention of a father who was determined to make up for all the lost time. But the transition was not without its challenges. On the first night, Isabella woke up crying around 3 a.m, calling for Mr. Ben. When Arthur rushed to her room, he found her huddled under the covers, trembling with fear. "Daddy, I dreamed you had disappeared," she sobbed, throwing herself into his arms. "I woke up and didn't know where I was. You're home, my princess, in your home, with your daddy and your little brother." Arthur hugged her tightly, feeling her small body still shaking. "I'll never leave you alone again. Promise. I promise with all my heart." From that night on, Arthur established a loving routine to help Isabella feel secure. Every morning, she would wake up and immediately run to his room to check if he was still there. Then, the 3 of them would have breakfast together, with Isabella helping to feed Thomas and telling him about her dreams from the night before. Richard Cole had immediately started the legal process to formalize custody, but as predicted, the bureaucracy was slow and complex. Isabella had no proper birth certificate, and a paternity recognition process would be necessary, which could take months. The good news is that with Dr. Mason's testimony and the DNA test we've already requested, we have solid evidence, Richard explained during a visit to his office. The bad news is that someone is trying to complicate the process. Someone? Who? I haven't been able to identify them exactly, but there's an anonymous challenge questioning your fitness to raise a child alone. They argue that a single man with no prior experience with children would be unsuitable for a traumatized girl. Arthur felt a rage building in his chest. Although Mrs. Vance had superficially reconciled with the situation, he suspected she still had reservations about the suitability of the family arrangement. What does that mean in practice? It means we'll have to prove not only that you're the biological father, but also that you can provide a stable and nurturing environment for Isabella. Richard paused. It might be time to consider hiring a nanny or governess, someone who can help with daily care and demonstrate that there is adequate female supervision. The idea of a stranger taking care of Isabella didn't sit well with Arthur, but he understood the strategic necessity. Do you have any recommendations? Actually, I do. I know a lady named Mrs. Clara who has worked with respectable families in the area for over 20 years. She's discreet, caring, and has special experience with traumatized children. Meanwhile, Isabella was experiencing her first moments of true childhood. Arthur had turned part of the backyard into a play area, with a swing set, a slide, and a playhouse where she spent hours creating elaborate stories for her dolls, which now included several new ones besides the original tattered rag doll. It was during one of these afternoons of play that something happened that deeply touched Arthur. He was watching Isabella play when he noticed she had arranged all her dolls in a row in the playhouse. "What are you doing, my dear?" "I'm teaching them how to live in a family," she answered naturally. "This one," she pointed to the original rag doll, "is the one who had no family, just like I used to be. And these others are the ones who came to take care of her when the doll's daddy found out she existed." The simplicity with which Isabella processed her own experience through play showed Arthur how she was gradually healing from the trauma of abandonment. But it also revealed that she still carried deep wounds that would require a lot of time and patience to fully heal. The first visit from Mrs. Vance, as an official grandmother, was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. She arrived carrying a box of old photographs and a carefully organized album with pictures of Maria, from a baby to an adult. "Isabella," she said, her voice softer than Arthur had ever heard it, "I brought some pictures of your mommy for you to see." Isabella's eyes widened with emotion when she saw the first photographs. There was Maria as a child, with the same curious and intelligent expression, the same curly hair, the same shy smile that Isabella showed when she was happy. "Did she look like me when she was little?" Isabella asked, gently touching a photo of Maria at about her age. "Just like you. Sometimes I look at you and it's like I'm seeing Maria all over again." Mrs. Vance paused, clearly moved. "She would be so happy to know you are safe and loved." "Do you think she can see me from where she is?" "I'm sure she can. And I'm sure she's proud of the brave girl you've become." It was during this conversation that Isabella asked a question that caught everyone off guard. "Grandma, why didn't Mommy tell you about me?" Mrs. Vance was silent for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes, when people get very sick, they make decisions they think will protect the people they love. Your mother probably thought it would be better for everyone if she kept it a secret. But she was wrong. Yes, my dear, she was wrong. We would have helped her, and you never would have been alone." That night, after Mrs. Vance left, Isabella asked to sleep in Arthur's room. "Just for tonight, Daddy. I'm afraid I'll dream about Mommy and be sad." "Of course you can sleep here." Arthur improvised a small bed next to his, where Isabella snuggled with her rag doll. "Daddy," she said in the dark, "do you think Mommy was sad when she had to leave me? I think it was the hardest thing she ever did in her life, but she did it because she loved you so much and wanted you to have a good life. And do I have a good life now? Now you have the best life I can give you, and every day will get even better." The following week, Mrs. Clara was introduced to the family. She was a 60-year-old woman, with her grey hair always tied in a neat bun, and a motherly demeanour that immediately put Isabella at ease. "Pretty girl," she said when she met Isabella. "I hear you like to draw. I'm very fond of art myself." "You know how to draw?" "I do, and I know how to bake cookies in the shape of animals. How about we make some together tomorrow?" The proposal delighted Isabella, who was starting to open up to the idea of having more people care for her. Mrs. Clara's presence also brought an added stability that Arthur hadn't realized was missing. Now he could work for a few hours each day without constantly worrying if Isabella was safe and happy. But it was during a routine checkup at the pediatrician's that an unexpected discovery brought new complications to their lives. Dr. Silva, after examining Isabella carefully, asked to speak with Arthur privately. "Mr. Fleming, I need to inform you about some issues I found in Isabella's examination." "What kind of issues? Is she sick?" "Not exactly sick, but there are signs of chronic malnutrition that are still affecting her development. Additionally, I found some scars that suggest she may have suffered more serious neglect than we imagined." Arthur's blood ran cold. What kind of scars? "Small marks that seem to have been caused by a lack of proper medical care when she was a baby. Nothing irreversible, but they will require specialized monitoring. What do I need to do?" "I recommend regular consultations with a pediatric nutritionist and psychological follow-up to ensure she develops properly. And," Dr. Silva hesitated, "this information will need to be included in the report I send to Child Protective Services as per protocol." Arthur knew that every new piece of information about Isabella's difficult past could be used against him in the custody process. Ill-intentioned people could argue that he was not prepared to handle a child requiring specialized care. But looking at Isabella in the waiting room, playing quietly with Thomas under Mrs. Clara's watchful eye, he knew he would do whatever it took to keep his family together. She had suffered enough in her early years. Now it was time to ensure she had all the love and care she deserved. The weeks following the doctor's visit brought a new, intense routine for the family. Arthur had arranged a rigorous schedule of specialized medical appointments for Isabella, including sessions with the nutritionist, Dr. Peterson, and weekly meetings with the child psychologist, Dr. Miller. The first consultation with Dr. Peterson revealed worrying information about Isabella's nutritional state. Malnutrition in the early years can have long-lasting consequences on cognitive and physical development, the specialist explained, showing charts that highlighted the girl's growth delay. "She is at least 6 months behind the ideal weight and height for her age. Can this be reversed?" Arthur asked, watching Isabella play in the waiting room through the glass door. "With proper care, yes, but it will be a long process, possibly taking over a year, and we will need to monitor for potential vitamin and mineral deficiencies that may have affected her neurological development." The psychologist, Dr. Miller, offered equally challenging perspectives. During her first individual session with Isabella, she observed clear signs of abandonment trauma and separation anxiety. "Isabella exhibits behaviors typical of children who have lived in chronic insecurity," she explained to Arthur after the session. "She constantly tests whether you'll really stay, hides food in her room as if preparing for another period of scarcity, and has trouble trusting that good things are permanent. What can I do to help her?" "Absolute consistency, predictable routines, a lot of patience with behavioral regressions, And most importantly, not making promises you can't keep. Children like Isabella need to completely rebuild their ability to trust. This medical information reached Richard at the most inopportune time. The lawyer called Arthur on a Thursday morning with alarming news. "Arthur, the anonymous challenge to your custody has intensified. They are now questioning your ability to handle a child who requires specialized medical care. But I am providing all the necessary care." "I know, and that's documented. But they argue that a child with trauma of this magnitude should be under the supervision of specialized professionals, not an inexperienced single father." "Who is making these allegations?" "It's still anonymous, but I suspect it's someone with access to confidential medical information. The challenges are very specific about Isabella's health condition." Arthur felt a rising fury. Someone was using his daughter's health struggles against him, trying to separate them just when she needed family stability the most. What happens now? "There will be an evaluation hearing next week. We will need to present evidence that you can provide the proper environment for Isabella, including testimonies from the doctors who are treating her." That evening, Arthur talked with Mrs. Clara about the situation. The governess had become an important confidant, as well as a crucial maternal presence in Isabella's life. "Mr. Fleming, this girl has blossomed since she arrived here," she said while preparing dinner. "Anyone with eyes can see she is so much better. But will that be enough to convince a judge?" "It should be." Isabella smiles now, something she didn't do when she arrived. She eats well, sleeps better, plays like a child should. Mrs. Clara paused. "And most importantly, she has trust. You can't fake that." At the hearing scheduled for the following week, Arthur prepared meticulously. Richard had gathered testimonies from all the professionals involved in Isabella's care, as well as photographic documentation showing her physical and emotional improvement. The day of the hearing arrived on a cold June morning. Arthur left Isabella with Mrs. Clara, promising he would be back soon. The girl, sensing the tension in the air, clung to his leg. "Daddy, are you coming back?" "Of course I am, my princess. It's just a boring grown-up meeting. And no one is going to take me away. No one, I promise." In the hearing room, Arthur was shocked to discover the identity of the person contesting his custody. It was not Mrs. Vance, as he had suspected, but Dr. Anthony Matthews, the director of a specialized institution for traumatized children. Accompanied by a lawyer Arthur recognized as being from a family of influential local politicians. "Your Honor," said the lawyer Ms. Alvim, "our client believes this child requires specialized care that can only be provided in a suitable institutional setting. Mr. Fleming, while well-intentioned, is not qualified to handle severe childhood trauma." "Mr. Fleming," the judge addressed him, "how do you respond to these allegations?" Arthur stood, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Your Honor, Isabella is not just a traumatized child who needs specialized care. She is my daughter, who has already suffered enough abandonment for a lifetime. Separating her from me now would be cruel and unnecessary." Richard presented the medical testimonies. Dr. Peterson confirmed that Isabella was responding exceptionally well to the nutritional treatments. Dr. Miller attested to significant progress in her psychological therapy, emphasizing that family stability was crucial for her continued recovery. But it was Mr. Ben's testimony that impressed the judge the most. The elderly grocer, wearing his best suit, spoke with a touching sincerity about the 3 years he had cared for Isabella. "Your Honor, I saw this girl arrive traumatized and abandoned. I saw her grow up without hope, just surviving. But since she found her real father, she is truly living. She laughs, she plays, she has trust. Taking her away from this man would be a cruelty. Doctor, Matthews argued that specialized institutions had resources and professionals that a single father could never provide. This child needs occupational therapy, intensive nutritional monitoring, constant psychiatric supervision. How can a businessman provide that? By providing it, Richard replied, presenting the complete documentation of the medical care Isabella was receiving. Mr. Fleming has hired the best professionals in the region, established an exemplary care routine, and most importantly, offers what no institution can give: genuine paternal love. The decisive moment came when the judge requested that Isabella be brought in for a private conversation. Arthur knew this moment would determine everything, but he couldn't shield his daughter from the questions that would come. Isabella entered the room, holding Mrs. Clara's hand firmly, wearing one of the new dresses Arthur had bought, her hair carefully combed. She looked around the solemn room with curiosity, but without fear. "Hello, Isabella," the judge said gently. "My name is Judge Fernando. May I ask you a few questions?" "You can, sir." "Do you like living with Mr. Fleming?" "I like it very much. He's my daddy." She smiled, that radiant smile that had won over so many people. "He takes care of me and Thomas." "And how does he take care of you?" "He gives me yummy food, takes me to the doctor when I need to go, reads me stories to help me sleep, and he never leaves without telling me where he's going." "And do you miss how your life was before?" Isabella was thoughtful for a moment. "I miss Grandpa Ben sometimes, but I don't miss being scared. Before, I was scared every day. Now I'm only scared when I dream my daddy leaves and doesn't come back." "And do you think he might leave?" "No. He always promises he'll come back, and he always does." Her voice became firmer. "My daddy never lies to me." The judge asked a few more questions, all answered by Isabella with a naturalness and confidence that clearly evidenced her emotional recovery. When she finally left the room, led away again by Mrs. Clara, the silence in the hearing room was absolute. "Gentlemen," the judge finally said, "I have rarely witnessed a traumatized child demonstrate such security and trust in a paternal figure. Mr. Fleming's temporary custody will be made permanent, with the condition that he must maintain the specialized medical follow-up." The relief Arthur felt was so intense, he had to lean on the table. Dr. Matthews and his lawyer left the room visibly disappointed, but Arthur didn't care about their defeat. Isabella was officially safe with him. When he got home and told her the news, Isabella threw herself into his arms with explosive joy. "Now I can call you Daddy forever?" "Forever, my princess, forever." The months following the custody victory brought a stability Arthur had never experienced since Maria's passing. The family had found its rhythm. Isabella attended a private school where she received specialized attention for her educational needs. Thomas grew up healthy under Mrs. Clara's watchful care, and Arthur managed to divide his time between work and his fatherly responsibilities. But it was during a seemingly ordinary September morning that an unexpected discovery brought new turmoil to their lives. Arthur was organizing some old documents when he found a forgotten folder at the back of Maria's desk drawer. Inside, there were letters she had written but never sent, all addressed to him. The first letter was dated 2 months before the discovery of Isabella's pregnancy. With trembling hands, Arthur began to read the words written in his wife's own hand. "My dearest Arthur, if you are reading this letter, it means I didn't have the courage to tell you personally something I've discovered. I am pregnant. And the doctors say continuing with the pregnancy could be dangerous because of my condition. I know you would ask me to choose my life over the baby's, but I can't make that choice. This child is our late miracle, our last chance to leave something of us both in the world." Arthur had to stop reading, his hands shaking with emotion. Maria had documented the entire decision-making process of hiding the pregnancy. her doubts, her fears, and most importantly, her overwhelming love for the child she was carrying. The second letter, written just a week before Isabella's birth, revealed details that broke Arthur's heart. "Arthur, our daughter will be born soon, and I know it might be the last thing I do in this life. I've arranged for her to be adopted by a good family in Denver, but something in my heart tells me this plan might go wrong. If something happens to me and you ever find our daughter, please forgive me for hiding this from you. I wanted to protect you from the pain of choosing between us." The most shocking revelation came in the third letter, written a few days after the birth. "My love, our daughter is born. She is beautiful, perfect. She has your eyes and my smile. I named her Isabella because it means gift from God. But the family that was supposed to adopt her disappeared with the money, and I am too weak to find another solution. A woman who works at the clinic has offered to care for her temporarily, but I'm afraid of what might happen. If I don't survive, look for our daughter. She wears a bracelet with my initials. It will be your clue to find her." Arthur realized that Maria knew something could go wrong with the adoption, but she was too weak to take other measures. The woman from the clinic who offered to care for Isabella temporarily was likely the one who abandoned her with Mr. Ben. That night, after Isabella and Thomas were asleep, Arthur decided to share this discovery with his daughter. Now 5 years old, she had matured emotionally and could process complex information about her history. "Isabella," he said, sitting on her bed, "I found some letters your mommy wrote before you were born. Would you like to know what she thought about you?" "Can I? Did she talk about me?" Arthur read selected passages from the letters, adapting the language so a child could understand. When he finished, Isabella was silent for a long time, processing the information. "So Mommy really wanted me, even knowing she could get sick?" "She wanted you more than anything in the world, so much that she chose to give you life, even knowing the risks. And did she know I was going to get lost?" "She was afraid it might happen, but she hoped everything would work out." Arthur stroked his daughter's hair. "The important thing is that in the end we found each other." "Daddy, can I keep one of Mommy's letters?" "Of course you can. When you're older, you can read all of them." Isabella hugged Arthur tightly. "I'm happy Mommy wrote me letters. It's like she can still talk to me." 2 weeks after this discovery, Mrs. Vance made an announcement that surprised the whole family. During a Sunday visit, she sat in the living room and put on a solemn expression. "Arthur, Isabella, I have something important to tell you." "What is it, Grandma?" Isabella asked, who had gotten used to calling Mrs. Vance by the affectionate title. "I've decided to sell my house and move into a smaller apartment. And I want to use part of the money from the sale to create an educational fund for you, Isabella, and Thomas." Arthur was surprised. "Mrs. Vance, that's not necessary." "Yes, it is. Maria left some money in her bank account, which by right belongs to her children. In addition, I want to ensure Isabella has access to all the medical treatments she needs for as long as necessary." "Grandma, does that mean you'll have money to buy me more dolls?" Isabella asked, with the naivety typical of her age. "It means you'll never have to worry about having the things you need, my dear." Mrs. Vance's generosity deeply touched Arthur, representing a complete transformation in her relationship with the situation. From an initial opponent, she had become one of the family's biggest advocates. But the most impactful news came a few days later, when Richard called with information that would completely change their perspective on Isabella's past. "Arthur, remember the investigation we did into the woman who abandoned Isabella with Mr. Ben?" "I remember. Did you find anything?" "I did. Her name is Valerie Shaw, and I found out she wasn't just a clinic employee. She was a nurse specializing in irregular adoptions." "What do you mean?" "She facilitated illegal adoptions for families who couldn't get through the official processes. Maria probably thought she was hiring a legitimate intermediary, but she was actually dealing with a baby trafficking ring. Arthur's blood ran cold. Are you saying they tried to sell my daughter? That's exactly it. Valerie took the money from the adoptive family, but when she found out Maria had passed away and there was no one left to hold her accountable, she simply abandoned Isabella with Mr. Ben and disappeared. Where is she now? In prison in Chicago for involvement in other illegal adoptions. The authorities are interested in your testimony to strengthen the case against her. And the revelation that Isabella had been a victim of a criminal network brought a mixture of relief and horror. Relief to know that Maria had not consciously chosen to abandon her daughter, and horror to discover how close Isabella had come to an even worse fate. Do we need to tell Isabella about this? Arthur asked. Not now. She's too young to understand the criminal complexities involved. But when she's older, she has the right to know the whole truth. That night, watching Isabella sleep peacefully in her bed, surrounded by the toys and security she now took for granted, Arthur reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. His daughter had survived abandonment, neglect, hunger, and fear. She had been a victim of people who saw children as merchandise, but she had also been saved by the kindness of strangers like Mr. Ben. And now, finally, she was where she always should have been, at home, with her family. Maria, he whispered to her photo on the nightstand, our daughter is safe. She is loved. You can rest in peace. Isabella stirred in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible, but with a smile on her lips. Her nightmares had become rare, replaced by dreams of family, security, and a future. She was finally a normal child in all the ways that mattered. Arthur knew there were still challenges ahead, medical issues to resolve, residual trauma to treat, a complicated past to explain when she grew up. But he also knew they had something more powerful than any difficulty. They had each other, and they had enough love to overcome any obstacle the future might bring. 6 months after the revelations about the criminal network that had affected Isabella, the Fleming family's life had found a prosperous and loving routine. Isabella, now 5½, attended school with enthusiasm and had made genuine friendships for the first time in her life. Thomas, at 2, toddled around the house after his older sister, imitating everything she did with evident adoration. But it was on a December morning, as Arthur was preparing for the celebration of Isabella's first official birthday at home, that an unexpected call brought the final twist to their lives. Mr. Fleming? The voice on the line was female, hesitant. My name is Claire Shaw. I'm Valerie Shaw's sister. Arthur almost dropped the phone. Valerie was the criminal nurse who had abandoned Isabella. How did you get my number? With great difficulty, sir. I need to speak with you urgently about your daughter, Isabella. I have nothing to discuss on that matter. Please listen to me. My sister told me things before she died that changed everything I thought about your daughter's case. Valerie died. She died in prison 3 weeks ago, cancer. But before she passed, she gave me information you need to know. Arthur hesitated, looking at Isabella playing in the backyard with Thomas and Mrs. Clara. What kind of information? Can I come over? It's something that needs to be said in person. After consulting Richard about the legal risks of such a meeting, Arthur agreed to receive Claire Shaw in the presence of his lawyer. She arrived the next afternoon, a simple-looking woman in her 40s, carrying a small bag of documents. Mr. Fleming, she began, her hands trembling slightly. My sister told me that Isabella's mother didn't die from childbirth complications. What do you mean? Arthur felt the world begin to spin. Maria Fleming died from poisoning. Valerie discovered she had left a letter detailing the entire irregular adoption operation. To protect their scheme, the heads of the network decided to eliminate her. The silence in the room was absolute. Richard was the first to recover. Ms. Shaw, these are very serious accusations. Do you have proof of what you're saying? Claire pulled a small, old recorder from her bag. Valerie recorded her confession before she died. She wanted the truth to be known. The recording they listened to over the next 2 hours destroyed and rebuilt everything Arthur thought he knew about Maria's passing. Valerie confessed in detail how Maria had discovered that the adoptive family was actually a couple who sold children for irregular international adoption. Maria threatened to expose the whole operation, Valerie's weak voice said on the recording. She said she would rather raise her daughter alone than hand her over to criminals. The bosses panicked. I tried to dissuade them, but they decided she was a threat that needed to be eliminated. The recording continued, with horrific details about how Maria was poisoned with a substance that would simulate postpartum complications, and how Valerie was forced to abandon Isabella so as not to raise suspicions about the true cause of the mother's death. I didn't want to do it, Valerie cried on the recording, but they threatened to kill the baby too if I didn't cooperate. I thought by leaving her with someone at the market, she would at least have a chance to survive. When the recording ended, Arthur was devastated. Maria hadn't died because of the risky pregnancy she had chosen to have. She had been murdered by criminals who wanted to silence her attempt to protect Isabella. Why did your sister wait so long to reveal this? Richard asked. She was scared. The heads of the network threatened to kill our entire family if she said anything. She only decided to tell when she knew she was dying. Claire paused. And because she found out that you had found Isabella and were raising her with love, she said Maria deserved for the truth to be known. Who were the heads of this network? Dr. Matthews was one of them. The revelation hit Arthur like a lightning bolt. Dr. Anthony Matthews, the director of the institution that had tried to take Isabella from him in court, was one of the criminals responsible for Maria's death. That's why he tried so desperately to get custody of Isabella, Richard realized. It wasn't to protect her, it was to silence her permanently. Exactly. Valerie said they were terrified when they found out Isabella had been found by her real father. The girl was the only living witness who could connect them to Maria's murder. Arthur felt a mix of horror and relief. Horror at discovering Maria had been murdered, and relief at realizing he had protected Isabella without knowing she was in mortal danger. What happens now? He asked. Now, Richard said, we hand this evidence over to the authorities and make sure those responsible pay for their crimes. Claire pulled more documents from her bag. Valerie also left these. They are the records of all the network's transactions, including the names of the children sold and the families who bought them. She wanted all the victims to be identified. The weeks that followed were intense. The police arrested Dr. Matthews and other members of the criminal network. Dozens of families were investigated, and several children who had been sold illegally were reunited with their biological families. Arthur had to decide how much to tell Isabella about these revelations. With Dr. Miller's help, he decided to wait until she was older to reveal the criminal aspects. But he told her they had discovered more details about why her mother had passed away. "Daddy," Isabella asked one night, "did Mommy try to protect me when she was alive?" "She did, my princess. She fought very hard to make sure you were safe. And are the bad men who hurt her in jail now?" "They are. They will never hurt another child again." Isabella became thoughtful. "I'm sad that Mommy suffered, but I'm happy that now I know she loved me so much, she fought the bad guys for my sake." The way Isabella processed complex information continued to impress everyone around her. At 6, she showed an emotional maturity and a capacity for forgiveness that inspired admiration. Dr. Matthews' trial became a national case. Arthur testified about his attempt to gain custody of Isabella, and his daughter was spared from testifying due to her age. The criminals were sentenced to decades in prison, and the network was completely dismantled. During the trial, it was revealed that more than 50 children had been victims of the operation over 10 years. Arthur and Isabella became symbols of hope for other families searching for lost children in the system. "Daddy," Isabella said after it was all over, "can I ask a question?" "You can always ask, my dear." "Do you think Mommy is proud of us?" "I'm absolutely sure she is. She fought to protect you, and she succeeded. You've grown up strong, brave, and full of love." "And do you think she's happy that I have you, Grandma Eleanor, Thomas, and Mrs. Clara, as my family?" "I think she's overjoyed." Isabella smiled, that luminous smile that had won over so many people throughout her journey. "Then it's all okay. If Mommy is happy, I'm happy too." That night, Arthur reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. His daughter had survived abandonment, neglect, criminals who wanted to silence her, and a system that almost separated her from him again. But more than survive, she had thrived. Isabella was now a happy, secure, loved child, surrounded by people who would do anything to protect her. She attended school, had friends, and dreamed of becoming a teacher when she grew up. Her physical and emotional scars were healing, replaced by memories of love, security, and family. Maria had sacrificed her life to protect Isabella, but her struggle had not been in vain. Her daughter had found her way back home, to the love she always deserved, and to the bright future that was just beginning. 2 years had passed since the final revelation about Maria and the dismantling of the criminal network. Isabella, now 7, was in 2nd grade and had become one of the most beloved students in her class. Her grades were excellent, but more importantly, she had developed a radiant personality that attracted genuine friendships and inspired affection in everyone who knew her. On the morning of the anniversary of Maria's death, Arthur woke up with a familiar mix of sadness and gratitude. It was a day he had learned to honor not only the wife he lost, but also the brave mother Maria had been to Isabella. "Daddy," Isabella said, walking into his room, still in her pajamas. "Today is Mommy's special day, isn't it?" "It is, my princess. It's the day we remember her. Can I pick the flowers we take to her grave?" "Of course you can." The annual visit to the cemetery had become a cherished family tradition. Isabella always chose colorful flowers, daisies, pink roses, sunflowers, because she said Mommy liked cheerful things. This year, she asked to also bring a drawing she had made in school. "It's a drawing of our family," she explained, proudly showing the colored paper. "There's me, you, Thomas, Grandma Eleanor, Mrs. Clara, and Grandpa Ben. And in the sky, there's Mommy, smiling down on all of us." At the cemetery, Isabella spoke to Maria as if she were present, telling her about her grades, her new friends, Thomas's antics, and most importantly, how happy she was with her family. "Mommy," she said, carefully arranging the flowers on the grave, "Daddy takes very good care of me. He never forgets to read me bedtime stories, always remembers my medicine, and takes me for ice cream when I get good grades." Arthur watched, moved, as his daughter had learned to process her mother's absence in a healthy way, turning the pain of loss into gratitude for the love she had received. "And Mommy," Isabella continued, "thank you for fighting to protect me. Daddy told me how brave you were. When I grow up, I want to be brave, just like you." As they left the cemetery, Arthur decided to make a special detour. He drove to the central market, where it had all begun almost 4 years earlier. Mr. Ben, now 65, was still working at his stand, but he had become a kind of father figure to several needy children in the area. "Grandpa Ben," Isabella shouted, running to hug the grocer who had saved her life. "My dear little one, How big and beautiful you've gotten. Grandpa, I brought a picture of us from Thomas's birthday party. Want to see? Mr. Ben examined the photograph with eyes shining with joy. There was the thin, frightened girl he had taken in, transformed into a healthy, happy child, surrounded by a family that loved her unconditionally. Isabella, he said, do you remember what it was like when you lived here with me? The girl became thoughtful. I do. I was scared of a lot of things. Scared of running out of food, scared of not having a place to sleep, scared that nobody wanted me. And now I know I'll always have a family that loves me. Even when I have nightmares sometimes, I know Daddy will be there when I wake up. Arthur was moved to hear how Isabella described her transformation. The girl had retained memories of the past, but not as paralyzing traumas, as reminders of how far she had come. On the way back home, Isabella asked a question that caught Arthur off guard. Daddy, are you still sad that you lost so much time not knowing I existed? Sometimes I am, my dear. I think about all the moments we missed together. But you know what I think? She said, with that wisdom that continued to surprise everyone. I think maybe we needed to go through those hard things to appreciate it even more when we finally found each other. You might be right. And besides, she continued, using a new word she had learned in school, if you had found me when I was a baby, I wouldn't have met Grandpa Ben, and he's very important to me. Isabella's ability to find positive aspects in even the most difficult experiences continued to inspire Arthur. She had turned her story of abandonment into a narrative of overcoming and gratitude. That afternoon, the family received a special visit. Richard arrived with documents Arthur had been waiting for almost 2 years, the final papers for Isabella's official adoption. Congratulations, the lawyer said, handing over the envelope. Isabella is now officially Isabella Fleming, your legal daughter in every respect. What does that mean? Isabella asked, curious. It means it's now official to the whole world that you're my daughter, Arthur explained. Not just my daughter in my heart, but my daughter on all the papers too. I was always your daughter, she said, hugging him. The papers are just agreeing with what we already knew. That night, Mrs. Vance came for a special celebration dinner. At 70, she had transformed into the most devoted grandmother Isabella and Thomas could have. She always brought carefully chosen gifts and stories of Maria's childhood that delighted the children. Grandma, Isabella said during dinner, can I ask a question? Of course, my dear. Are you happy that I came to live with you all? Mrs. Vance stopped eating, clearly moved by the question. Isabella, you brought a joy to our family that I didn't even know was missing. Maria would be so proud of the wonderful granddaughter you've become. And I'm proud to have a grandma who makes the best chocolate cakes in the world, Isabella replied, sparking laughter around the table. After dinner, while Mrs. Clara put Thomas to bed and Mrs. Vance tidied up the kitchen, Arthur and Isabella sat on the porch to watch the stars, a tradition they had developed over the past few months. Daddy, she said, pointing to a particularly bright star, is that one Mommy's star? It could be. What do you think? I think so. It's shining really bright, just like her love for us. Arthur hugged his daughter, reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. 4 years ago, he was a man devastated by loss, raising a baby alone and battling depression and loneliness. Isabella was an abandoned child, living on the streets, with no family, no future. Now they had both found not only each other, but a complete and loving family. Isabella was thriving academically and socially. Her traumas transformed into a strength that made her more compassionate and resilient. Arthur had discovered that being a father was his greatest purpose in life, and that love could indeed heal the deepest wounds. Isabella, he said, Thank you for saving me that day at the market. I should be thanking you for finding me, she replied. But you know what I think really happened? What? I think Mommy helped us find each other. She knew you needed a daughter and I needed a daddy, so she made sure our paths crossed. Looking at this extraordinary girl who had transformed his life, Arthur knew that Isabella was right. Maria had managed to protect her daughter, not in the way she had originally planned, but in the only way that truly mattered, by ensuring she found her way back to unconditional love. I love you, my princess, he said. I love you too, Daddy, forever and always. And so, under the starry sky of Redstone, the family that found each other through pain and was strengthened through love continued to write their story. A story that proved that even the hardest beginnings can have the most beautiful endings, and that true love always finds a way to prevail. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.